do you think of that bill insert? Super intelligible, right?
Do you have to have an advanced degree to read a bill insert?
Well, I think part of it is I think they're obligated to put everything in there, and the important things get buried in the everything.
Well, yeah, the important thing, like how much did it change, is not actually readily apparent. So
it is not readily apparent.
And I don't think it's actually in here. So
it's probably not. It's actually just the change to the rate, and that doesn't really tell anybody anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can provide a little clarity on that. What's up, everybody? Corey Singletary here with the Citizens Utility Board. Here with
Tom Content. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Happy New Year to everyone.
That's right. We're back.
Yes, we are back in the new year, 2023. Hoping for good things. Yeah, it's just really hard to pull anything out of that, isn't there?
No, it's just yikes.
But a couple items today. Rate case recap, rate adjustment, rate increase recap for 2023 for your most Wisconsin utility customers for your utility service starting January 1, 2023 and running through at least August of this year, if I'm remembering correctly. As well as in general, talking about what's causing utility rates to go up so high.
Crazy.
Yeah, there was
big increases.
There was an interesting piece. There was a piece by Carl Ebert, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, as well as a piece in the New York Times that actually Carl linked in his story. And so we'll talk about that. But right off the top, we had promised folks a recap of kind of where things landed at the end of the year. There were a lot of moving parts. There were true-ups from 2021. There were rate cases. There were fuel cost plans. There were a lot of things moving around. But we have kind of the bottom line numbers, at least on average.
That's right. You did some research for this one.
Yeah. On average, your mileage may vary depending on how much you use electricity or natural gas. I don't know if there's a particularly good order to go in these, but maybe the I don't know, the blue ribbon winner in the list of not so great is Alliant. Alliant customers overall, starting the beginning of this year, on average, residential rates would go up about 5% between cost of fuel increases and other items, mostly driven by the cost of fuel. And then MG&E and Excel coming in at about 7.25%, 7.5% in that range, again on average for electric. And then Wisconsin Public Service Corporation customers up in the northeast part of Wisconsin, about 9. We'll call it 9%. 8.99 is, when you go into the grocery store and you see something for $8.99, we all know it's $9.
It's $9, yeah. So 9%.
9% for those customers. And then the blue ribbon winners in the sad category are the We Energies electric customers with an 11.28% average increase for residential electric customers. So
yes,
that's the picture. Gas is not great either. The increases that were authorized for We Energies, Wisconsin Gas, and Wisconsin Public Service, as well as Alliant Energy, range, from, I believe, somewhere in the 6.75% up to 10.75% increase. Yeah, Alliant Energy is about 9.8. We Energy is 10.75. Wisconsin Public Service 7.64%. So if you look at both electric and natural gas, if you're a combined electric and natural gas customer of these utilities, rates are going up.
There you go. And those natural gas charges are just over the local charges. I mean, the bigger portion of your bill is that commodity charge, which is the price of gas, which if you're using a lot of gas a couple weeks back when it was frigid as heck around here, that overwhelms a lot of this. But it's almost everywhere you turn. It's big stuff, big increases, and a lot of it driven by that natural gas price, the natural gas, and even the coal coal impact of increasing coal prices and mitigation steps the utilities are taking on coal that they're driving up the fuel costs for folks. But it is telling that the big increases are the two utilities that came in for the big general rate case. I guess that's not a shocker, but.
Yeah, it's not a shocker because those increases also include inflationary costs to everything on the utilities business, whether it be their expenses, the steel they're putting in the ground, the new investments they're making.
Right.
Market conditions. We heard a lot about that in discussion about finance issues, and we won't go down that rabbit hole. But there was a lot of sort of general current inflationary market pressures for those utilities. So that's kind of the recap. You're looking at somewhere between mid sevens to 11 and a quarter for most customers on average, with Alliant customers sort of winning out, I guess, with only about a 5% increase. But let's go back to some of those drivers, right? And we've got that New York Times piece on like why are utilities costs so high? I know you've looked at it. What do you think?
I mean, I think a lot of it is those commodity costs and are really big drivers. I think it's that whole timing of the clean energy transition where we're stuck with utilities were pushing forward some of the clean energy investments. But the New York Times brought up a different angle and cited some Harvard Business School research that talks about the impact of deregulation versus regulation, and I know that's something that has been watched very closely over the years. As in the Midwest, Wisconsin's average rates have been higher than the Midwest average, and Illinois, where they fully deregulated, was lower. But what this new research is showing is that the regulated states are seeing some increases over time, not just. They're seeing increases just now because some of there's an automatic, almost instantaneous impact on costs with these commodity costs in deregulated states, more so than in Wisconsin. But this analysis is actually looking over a longer time horizon and saying that deregulated states' prices, there's concerns about inadequate oversight of wholesale energy markets and inadequate protection for retail customers in those deregulated states.
Yeah, and the other thing that jumped out to me, there was a lot of talk about deregulation, deregulated versus traditionally regulated states. And the other thing that kind of jumped out to me in that conversation was they talked a lot about transmission investment and the cost of building transmission and those being passed on to customers. And certainly we've talked about the increasing cost of the transmission part of the tab in your utility bills, the amount of your utility bills that's made up of transmission costs, and that's an interesting one as well. Now there's obviously a balance of like, do you need to have some transmission. It's not great to go back to the super old days where your utility was just entirely just sort of in a silo and doing its own thing, but there has to be a balance on oversight. And I think that's really the big theme there. And I think one good reason that this has come up is this question of competition in utility service has surfaced fairly recently, right? In the conversation in the state, particularly in Milwaukee.
Right, exactly. I mean that there's questions There's concern in Milwaukee with the cost pressures that folks are seeing. That we saw that with the involvement of the Lindsay Heights neighborhood and Walnut Way Conservation Corp in the rate case. You're seeing a push to actually propose to take Milwaukee out from the We Energy service into its own municipal utility. Which is not an easy step to do in Wisconsin. It's been done before, but it's mainly been done for small water utilities where the privately owned utility wanted to sell it back to the community. That happened in the Beloit area and Mequon, Bayside area in over the last 15 or so years. But that's a pretty bold move to try to actually municipalize energy in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I believe there's some folks are seeking a referendum on municipalization as well as some sort of directive or some sort of desire to seek additional competition. And you and I both working in this industry, those are two things that come up frequently in conversations of, well, what can we do about these electricity bills going up all the time? And those are certainly options, but I think that they're not the silver bullet or that most people maybe think they are.
Well, and that's the thing. It comes back to really what are the rates? What are the rates actually paying for, and what kind of a dent can we make in keeping those cost increases from being so significant? And part of that for us in the WEC cases was going after and really trying to bring down those profit rates. And we saw a little bit of progress there, but not enough.
Yeah, and I think municipalization is kind of its own thing that comes with its pros and cons, but it is maybe a little less tied to cost overall because it really gets down to sort of ownership structure and the incentives that maybe come with that ownership structure. But the competition side, you had mentioned I think it was the Harvard Business School, Kennedy School study, not Kennedy School, Harvard Business School study of retail choice or competition versus traditional regulation. And you and I have heard from our counterparts in other states, other consumer advocate offices that exist in a deregulated market. And we usually don't hear kittens, unicorns, and rainbow stories, do we?
No, there's a lot of complaints, a lot of the companies that actually come into those marketplaces end up getting accused of consumer protection violations and basically targeting customers and unfair billing practices and all sorts of things, where things that haven't hit us because we do have oversight here in Wisconsin.
I mean, taking the devil's advocate position a little bit, so the notion of competition in utility service, particularly utility supply, that has a certain appeal, right? Competition, markets should drive costs down.
Exactly.
Right. But and certainly it is not universally bad for all states that did deregulate and do have retail choice, which is what it's often called when you can pick the company that provides, we'll call it the electrons that then are delivered by your local utility company. But the biggest thing that we've heard from other states that do have retail choice is that really the problem is that it shifts the risk to the customers, right? A good example was the winter storms we've had the last few years.
Oh yeah, and you saw what happened in the Texas incident in particular, with the natural gas price surges there and the blackouts, and let alone leaving aside the human toll of that disaster, the impact of some of those rate plans that the state had to end up had to intervene and take steps to mitigate some of the $1,000 bill increases that people saw within 24 hours or 72 hours or a week's time, and it just showed some of the flaws of the way that at least Texas had set up its markets.
Yeah, because I think a lot of states and a lot of suppliers in competitive markets have touted, look at how low these rates are. But that was during relatively stable economic times. It wasn't during this current period. For example, right now with commodity and fuel prices, bouncing all over the place, increasingly severe storms, more so than we saw in the decade prior, and so retail choice can potentially be great when the times are good, but if things go bad, then all of that, you bear the risk both ways as the customer.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that, Wisconsin hasn't seen a big push for retail choice, basically since the Enron collapse. That was in early 2001 timeframe. So it's something that I don't. there's talk of always should deregulation happen, and I think that really hasn't been the conversation in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that hasn't. It's full transparency. CUB is a member of the Customers First Coalition, a relatively broad stakeholder group made up of utilities, unions, municipal utilities, and us as the consumer group in the conversation. And that group was formed basically to kind of stand opposed generally to deregulation, or deregulation in the sense of doing away with the regulatory model that we have in Wisconsin, where basically almost everything is subject to some sort of regulatory oversight. And I think that's something that most people don't appreciate, is that the vast majority of every decision, at least in theory, on paper, is subject to review and approval by a regulator, and it's not just an automatic pass-through to the customer's bills.
Yeah, that's right. And, Customers First includes those public power, those municipal utilities. And I know we've looked at the cost differential between some of the IOUs and the municipal utilities, and it is less expensive for municipal customers in Wisconsin. For the We Energies customers who live in the Milwaukee area, they can compare it to Cedarburg, which is a municipal part of WPPI Energy, and it's 30 to 40% lower cost for those municipal utilities, and that is a striking difference between the different models that we do have in Wisconsin.
To a certain extent, I guess, in defense of We Energy, Cedarburg does not own any of its generation.
True.
They purchase everything through a purchase power contract. So that's what I'd mentioned earlier. That's municipalization is kind of its own very interesting conversation. But yeah, competition. It's you could probably walk into a room with sort of pure economists, and they'd be like, "Yeah, this sounds like a great idea," but we've been talking a lot about cost, but one of the things you hit on earlier was also the sort of consumer protection, I'll call it consumer experience end of things. And, I think we've all of us at this point have gotten the phone call from someone that would like to reach us and talk to us about our car's warranty. And, can you imagine what would happen if your electric supplier was now subject to competition, and you could pick an alternative, and people were then trying to jockey for your business? And again, that sounds great, but if those entities are deregulated and can essentially do whatever they want to do, then that gives me a lot of pause.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of pause there.
It's big pause. And I guess the last thing I'll leave is sort of an anecdote we've heard a few times from, again, some of our consumer advocate peers in other states, is where they, especially ones where their offices take complaints, and they talk to these people who went with the alternative energy supplier, the competitive alternative, and what they've found is that in so many of these cases, the customers would pay less if they had just stayed with the incumbent utility, the utility that also provides the poles and wires to connect the service to their house. So that's a complicated one. Maybe circling back to the other piece in the NY Times article, what do you think about, the lot of what they talked about was the fact that things that go into the utility bill in a competitive, in a deregulated market are not subject to regulatory approval. But transmission isn't. I mean, it's kind of like there's some elements that are federal jurisdiction, and there's some pieces that are state. But I don't know. From my perspective, transmission investment seems to be kind of loosey-goosey, and the utilities can kind of almost do whatever they want.
Yeah, and you've seen that over time. The transmission cost used to be, 4 pennies of a typical dollar on a utility bill, and it's no longer a single digits. I know. Mm-hmm. I don't know the exact percentage today, but it's gone up, and then we've got a lot more transmission spending on the horizon now.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about it before, and I spoke with someone from Iowa about the Mid-Continent Independent System Operators long-range transmission plan that's going to come out in multiple waves, and they announced the first wave of those projects, first tranche of those projects, and they're going to be announcing the second tranche, I think, sometime in 2023. And that's hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of investment that's going to flow to not only Wisconsin ratepayers, wallets, but or hit Wisconsin ratepayers' wallets, but customers across the Midwest. But the thing that always strikes me is, we always have these big contentious cases before the commission about transmission siting. Anytime it's a big transmission project.
Yes.
But those arguments are simply about location. There is some discussion of cost, and the commission is supposed to take that into consideration
and need.
But it always kind of feels like as long the transmission operator just kind of points to MISO, to the regional grid operator, and says, well, they say we need this,
right?
So we're going to build it.
So we're not going to be the ones to stop it.
Yeah, and so it's this. Where does that review for need and cost, truly happen?
Right.
If the utilities that want to build the project are kind of deferring to this entity that there's really no regulatory oversight, and and the states are maybe potentially saying, okay, well, yeah, you're right, we buy your argument that the regional operator says that we need this, and then FERC is really more about cost and less about siting.
Right.
So that's a challenging one, and it's one that I think there are going to be a lot of fights over the next few years in Wisconsin and around the Midwest about some of these projects. Really trying to make certain that the money that's spent is necessary for customers.
Yeah. And that's an area where there should be competition allowed. If there should be competition allowed for building these giant, massive power lines. Projects, because the experience in other states has been that customers have seen savings when you are able to have competitive bidding, so low cost bidding, as well as cost caps for transmission projects, and we're seeing more and more examples of that around the country, and certainly hopeful that that the state law doesn't change in Wisconsin to give incumbents protection against competitive bidding. There was a bill that came up last session that CUB was part of a coalition that opposed that, and we're certainly hopeful that doesn't resurface this session, but it looks like it might.
Yeah, I mean, and there's that. I guess that might sound weird. It's in one instance, it sounds like we're against competition and we're for competition here, but this is competitive procurement, really.
Exactly.
Right? And I think it's all about power dynamics, because it's a big company that wants to develop a transmission line. There's, say, a particular project on the table that someone's got to build. And we're talking about multi-billion-dollar companies interacting with each other, interacting with the entity that runs the market, right? Whereas deregulation and retail choice is multi-billion-dollar companies and the customer, the individual, and that power dynamic is just not. The customer's really kind of in a disadvantaged position there, and is just in such a. It's so easy for these companies to take advantage of customers. It
is. So, circling back to where we started on the increases, I just wanted to make another plug for folks who may be struggling with their bills to reach out for energy assistance. Talk to your utility about getting on a balanced budget plan if you're not already on one, and also just see if you can qualify for energy assistance and/or incentives from Focus, because there's a lot of things hitting people all at once, but a lot of people could be struggling given the kind of the double whammy of the home heating cost inflation plus the increases we're seeing on the electric side.
Yeah. And a little sort of factoid for those to maybe provide some incentive for folks who either need assistance or know folks who could benefit from energy utility bill assistance, electric, natural gas, electric and heating, is that I believe this is a nationwide number, but it's probably representative in Wisconsin, is about 27% of folks who are income eligible for the assistance programs, federal assistance, state assistance programs for their utility bills, actually apply and get qualified and receive that assistance. So there's a big gap. There's a big opportunity for folks to get help if they need it. So absolutely, yes. I think that's
got to we got to work with utilities, work with other folks to get the word out in new and different ways so that more people take advantage of the federal dollars that are out there.
Yeah. So we'll recap these numbers. We'll put them. There'll be a show notes section that we're going to start putting stuff up on the CUB website, cubwi.org/podcast, and there'll be some show notes, and we'll put these rate increases up there, just kind of summary for folks. And subscribe, follow along, so you can keep up with any additional changes. Because more things are coming. We got some
more things are coming, and as we warned, we're expecting more requests for increases to hit the commission this year. So,
yeah, I think it's going to be a whole big party with every single large investor-owned utility, at least the big five. The big utilities, big five, will be in. For some sort of rate adjustment. Certainly doesn't seem like they're going to be decreases, so some sort of rate increase for 2024. So stay tuned. And we'll be talking about, there's some projects about battery electric storage, which is interesting. And I think we'll probably start seeing some things about EVs for folks that are interested in EVs.
Yep.
There's some proposals there, and then hopefully, and by the end of Q1, we'll have something exciting to talk about that might help with affordability. So
there you go.
All right. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and thank you, Tom.
All right. Catch you next time.
Catch you all in the next one.